Our guest today isn't just leading a technology company, he's redefining what that company can be. Cristiano Amon is the president and CEO of Qualcomm, and under his leadership, Qualcomm is undergoing a significant evolution. Long known as a company that powered the smartphone revolution and made 3G, 4G, and 5G possible, Cristiano has been clear about his ambition to expand Qualcomm far beyond mobile and position it at the center of intelligent computing everywhere. Cristiano rose through the Qualcomm engineering and product ranks, which gives him a deep understanding of both the technology and the ecosystem. And now at a moment when AI is shifting from the cloud to the edge, he's betting that the future belongs to powerful, energy-efficient computing built directly into the devices around us. I've had the privilege of working with Cristiano through the Global Semiconductor Alliance, where he serves on the board of directors and leads the CEO Council. In those settings, I've seen firsthand his ability to bring industry leaders together around shared challenges, from supply chain resilience to innovation policy to the future of global competitiveness. Today, we'll talk about what kind of leadership it takes to reinvent a company that's already successful, how you balance legacy strengths with bold expansion, and why he believes Qualcomm's next chapter may be its most consequential yet. All right, Cristiano, welcome to A Bit Personal. I'm so excited to have you.
Very happy to talk to you, Jodi.
Yeah, and we're at Qualcomm's headquarters today, so thank you for all the hospitality.
Oh, no problem. Thank you for being here.
So I'm really excited to hear sort of the personal story behind your public success, and I'm sure the audience is as well. And you have, your career has unfolded sort of at the intersection of, very fascinating intersection of worlds. So you were born and grew up in Brazil. You became the CEO of a major American technology company, which happens to connect billions of people across the globe together. So that's quite an ironic arc. So tell me a little bit about what it was like growing up in Brazil, what the environment was like, and how it impacted your view as a child.
Yes. Well, it's a difficult question to answer, but look, I'm born and raised in Brazil. It's interesting. I've been here now for about a little over 30 years. But I did, grew up in Brazil, went to electrical engineering school in Brazil. That's where I got, into electrical engineering, and I think I'm a little bit of a mix, I think, of both. I think I have incorporated a lot of elements, I think, of the American culture, but I also, somebody that has elements of Brazilian culture, and I think it's been great.
So do you think that sort of cultural diversification that you grew up around helped you be a better CEO of a global company?
Look, I often talk to there's few of us, other, I think, Brazilian-born CEOs, and we kind of, often we meet at events and we talk about it, and I think there's one thing that I believe it is true for all of us. Brazil is not for beginners. So I think what happens is you learn how to deal with adversity, you know how to deal with difficulty, so you actually you don't panic. Things, sometimes things don't work as planned and you have to improvise, and I think that's one of the things that you learn growing up in Brazil. And I do believe that has brought a benefit, I think, to how I deal with business, how I deal with adversity, and I think probably other Brazilian CEOs will tell the same thing. I think that's the advantage that you have of being, grew up in a place that you have to deal with a lot of adversity, a lot of changes all the time, and I think that's a skill, I think, that comes in handy.
Right, yeah. I mean, I've heard from a lot of CEOs that some stories about resilience, and it sounds like just growing up in Brazil takes resilience. So maybe that you can transfer that over to your role as CEO. So it's been interesting to talk to so many CEOs on this podcast and learn about what success meant in their household. So some of them have said, oh, well, I mean, it was sort of a minimum requirement to get a PhD, or they talk about, well, I mean, I had to at least be number one in my class or I would have disappointed my parents. So tell me a little bit about the values and expectations and definition of success in the household that you grew up in.
Probably very different than the things you just described. It was, look, it was kind of, I would say my dad probably had an influence on me because he's an electrical engineer. However, it's a little different. I think he has the classical electrical engineering, not electronics. So he worked at a utility company at my hometown. And his whole career, it was, that's the traditional electrical engineer of energy generation, transmission and distribution. So he had an influence, but it was kind of different. Actually, when I went to high school and I wanted to go to college, and my dad said, you can choose anything you want, as long as engineering school, law school, medical school, right? And then I thought, okay, well, of the three of them, I think I probably like engineering the most. I think there was an influence about, my dad being an electrical engineer. I picked electrical engineer. I was always fascinated about communications and wireless. I think the mindset that I get in my household, which is the same, I think, that probably my dad got from my grandpa. My grandpa, it's the story of many immigrants in America and in Brazil. I think my grandfather immigrated from Lebanon. It's a Catholic town in Lebanon called Mahidushi. Immigrated in the very early 1900s, I think, like everybody. At the time, there are boats going to New York, the boats going to Santos. That's where he went, start working on coffee farms, and then kind of save some money, start building his own business. So I think we always had this mindset that you're going to have to, you're going to got to go to life and you have to figure out how to survive. I think my dad was like that. So that was kind of my mindset. And that's kind of probably had an influence how did I actually left Brazil. I saw an opportunity when I came out of college. My first job was at NEC, and they wanted to transfer me to Japan, and I went, and I think from there to Qualcomm. So I think that's probably the mindset that had an influence. But yeah, it's just things that just happen.
Okay. I mean, was there a big emphasis on education? Like, no matter what, you have to go.
No, but I do remember one of the things I do remember that my dad said it to me, which is true, and I think I took it to heart. I think when he said, "Look, it would be a good idea, for you to get to a good university and get a degree, because no matter what happens to your life, you may lose everything, but that's not going to be taken away from you." And I think, okay, it's a good idea. I need to go do that.
Okay. In Brazil, Brazilian families, very tight familial bonds, a lot of traditions. You talked about resilience. What of those three things carried over to your life when you raised your children?
Oh, family, incredibly important. Incredibly important. Like, for example, it's a unique thing to the Brazilian culture and probably the family they grew up with.
Okay, so, I mean, Brazil is such a vibrant culture. I mean, my few trips.
Happy place.
Yeah, it's so fun. But in the 1980s and 90s, it wasn't like sort of a hotbed of technology. So it is very interesting that you found your way into the most sophisticated industry in the world.
Often people in Brazil refer to me and others, I think, as part of the Brazilian engineering diaspora, because what happened is during the 80s and the 90s, there was a lot of things happening within Brazil on the engineering side. Maybe I'm going to tell you, like, for example, Brazil is one of the few countries in the world that have created an aerospace industry. Look at Embraer that makes planes. As an example of that, Brazil, there was a massive amount of Brazilian engineering in hydroelectrical power plants. If you remember what happened in the oil crisis of the 80s, Brazil was the first country in the world that actually developed a completely renewable fuel with ethanol, and most of the cars weren't ethanol. So you have, and then what happened, especially in electronics, was a time that there was a lot of incentives, I think, for companies to develop, a lot of technology associated with computing. And it's interesting. Necessity is the mother of our inventions. Most of the most advanced computing companies in Brazil was derivative from the financial sector, because Brazil was one of the first countries to actually digitize the banking system, because you have hyperinflation of 30% per month, so you can't do this stuff with pen and paper anymore. I've been educated in Brazil. I think I went to a great electrical engineering class, and it's interesting when I look at the people that graduated with me. Probably about half are outside Brazil, mostly in the United States. And I think that's what happened. It was just the transition where that industry that was developed took in a different direction, and it creates a mass exodus, I think, of especially folks from engineering, from electronics, and I'm one of them.
Okay. Well, I'm sure that the hometown is very, very proud of you and what you've accomplished.
I try to, when I go there, I try to be, the person that grew up there. I'm always like a very low profile person. I go frequently. My parents are there, and I always have the list of restaurants I want to go, a list of friends. I keep different WhatsApp group from my middle school friends, from my high school friends, from my college friends, and that's kind of opportunity to kind of remain connected with them when I go there.
Every leader I respect has a moment where they realize the real job is judgment, not the public narrative, not the headlines. Judgment, especially when the stakes are high and the future is unclear. KPMG works with technology leaders in that space. They help companies think through transformation with a sharper sense of risk and responsibility, particularly as AI changes what it means to operate at scale. When you have that kind of partner, decisions get clearer. Learn more at kpmg.com. Now let's get back to the episode. So you joined Qualcomm in the mid-1990s.
1995.
1995, exactly mid. And of course, as you said, wireless was still a really bold idea. And so you join the company, and then all of a sudden this revolution happens. When did you realize that you were part of something that was going to change entirely the way that the world communicates?
Early. Look, I think when I got out of college, it was like the beginning of cell globally, right? And including, that was the beginning of cellular systems. Analog at that time was amps, I think, being deployed in Brazil. And I think in Brazil, the largest company at that time in the early cellular, some of the biggest companies were the infrastructure companies like Ericsson. At the time was AT&T Network Systems. It became Lucent. Of course, Motorola, that was the king, cellular. And in a very unique way, I think outside Japan, Brazil was probably the largest market for NEC, just because of the big Japanese community. The largest Japanese community outside Japan. It's Japanese that immigrated to Brazil in the early 1900s. So NEC it was a big company at the time. So I joined them right after college, and it was the beginning of cellular. We were kind of building the infrastructure. I started my career as MSc, Mobile Switching Center System Engineer. Okay. And within about 1 year into the job, I just came out of college, they decided to transfer me to the headquarters. That's when I left Brazil first time and went to Japan. And then quickly you saw that cellular is going to move to digital cellular. And at the time, I was part of the group that actually, it was another question you asked, but I'm going to tell the story because it's interesting. I was part of the group that came from a business trip from Japan, actually, to San Diego to meet this tiny company called Qualcomm that invented this technology called CDMA. And they wanted to understand about this technology and probably take a license to build a digital cellular system with CDMA. That was my first experience with Qualcomm. This is Qualcomm's small company. Interesting, when I landed in San Diego, I got off the plane, I looked at the city, and I said, wow, I think I'm going to live here. I don't know how, but I have a feeling I'm going to live in this town. That's it. And kind of went by. And then I saw what Qualcomm was doing, and when I understood, I think what Qualcomm is doing, I said, "This is incredible. This is revolutionary." I think maybe the fact of my understanding of the technology and communications, and to my surprise, I didn't expect it. But then Qualcomm. Offered to hire me, and that's why I joined Qualcomm in 1995. Before the very first CDMA system went live, there was this Hutchison in Hong Kong. It was funny because when I told my dad, I said, "Dad, I got this a job offer to join this company," and I joined Qualcomm as an engineer in 1995. And I said, "This company called Qualcomm." And he said, "Never heard of this company. What are you doing? You should, you work in a big company called." And he said, "Why are you going to do this?" And but for me at that time, to answer your question, I had clarity. This is going to be incredibly successful of what's happening in wireless. And I've been very fortunate. I've been through my career and the fact, I did analog at NEC, but with Qualcomm, 2G, 3G, 4G, 5G, maybe 6G. So I've been fortunate enough to participate and see every single wireless transition and wireless has actually done with this society and the world.
So you really came to Qualcomm because of the technology and understanding the way.
Yeah, I love the company, love the technology. And I said, "Well, I can't believe it. I love the town, I love the company, I love the technology. I can't believe this is happening," and it was great. And look, I'm very biased. I tell people, I love Qualcomm. I've been this company for 30 years. I think it's an incredible place. I feel. When I look about my job as CEO, more than anything, I know every CEO is accountable to the shareholders of the company, but more than anything, I feel incredible responsibility to steer this company that, has done so much for me and for many of us. They're part of Qualcomm. Actually, that's the biggest responsibility. How do I every day, I hope I'm doing the right thing for the people that I can trusted, of this company and entrusted in me the ability to lead them. And I want to make sure I don't screw up because this company is very special.
Okay, that's nice. So I remember when I was meeting with Steve Mollenkopf, who was the former CEO, and I was trying to remember the exact day, but I remember he had just had a meeting with Hillary Clinton. So I think that it was during the election in 2016. And I was visiting him here, and he's like, "Oh, by the way, you really need to get to know Cristiano Amon." So at that point, you had been at Qualcomm for decades. You stayed because you said that you loved the company, loyal to the mission of the company. So did you know ultimately, was it your dream when you started, or at what point in your career did you think I could be the CEO of this company?
No. Like I said, look, born in the city in the interior of the state of São Paulo in Brazil. I'll never imagine I'm going to be CEO of Qualcomm one day. No, I'll say the only time that became clear to me, I think, when Steve made me president of the company in 2018, with the intent of as preparing me for becoming his successor. But before that, I was, even how I progressed within Qualcomm was just as a natural result of what we're doing, and it was it was the right thing to happen at that time, and I took that as the next mission. I never had, I'm gonna plan this out, though I'm gonna be CEO of this company. No, it just happened.
So how did once the company saw what the transition was going to be with Steve, how did they prepare you, or how did Steve prepare you?
I grew up within the semiconductor business of the company. If you look at my trajectory, I think I was, when Steve became president of the semiconductor business, QCT, I was running the mobile business. There was CDMA and WCDMA at that time. I think then later, as Steve became president of the company, I was running the semiconductor business. And then I went to the trajectory, I think that Steve had, and I became president of the company, became CEO. So I think it was kind of the the natural, I think, evolution that probably started with our founder, Erwin. I think it just happened this way. Erwin always said, even when I talked to him when we had our 40th anniversary, he repeated, which is, a Qualcomm CEO has to be an engineer, and I think that's kind of we don't have many of those, but I think that's the tradition. So I think it's probably, I'll say, the natural progression that we would expect within Qualcomm.
And how did that personally feel when the day that you were named CEO of Qualcomm?
I felt a little bit I think it goes probably, everyone goes to this. You have a mix of excitement about, and then you have, wow, I look at what I need to do now. The bar becomes higher. There's always a lot of challenges. I think, as much as people may want to say CEOs are not easy jobs, sometimes it's a lonely job too. I try not to make it lonely, it comes with the excitement comes an incredible sense of responsibility, and I think I won't say fear, but you don't want to fail. You wanted to succeed, and I think especially as a new CEO, you're going to have to learn things. I think I never approach any job thinking, oh, I know everything. That's actually one of the motivations for me to do new things, end up propelling me in my career, was actually the desire to learn new things. And to be a CEO, I knew I had to learn new things.
So when you became the CEO, what was one or two things that you knew that you had to get right in the beginning in order for the ship to stay on course?
Well, there were a couple things. Maybe some of those things it will resonate because you can see it. Some of those things you probably don't see it. So I'm going to start with the things you don't see it. I think I needed to do an important transition for the company. I think the company, Qualcomm, through its mission, has reinvented itself many times. But if I go back to the beginning state and the end state, I think it's easier to describe that transition. Qualcomm used to be a licensing company that had a semiconductor business on the side. Qualcomm today is a semiconductor business that happens to be a licensing business on the side. Right? So one of the things I needed to do, I need to complete the transition into making Qualcomm equal the semiconductor company. Okay. And I think it has a lot to do how we organize ourselves, how we thought about the structure of the company, how we think about the position of the business. And I think that's one of the things that it was a mission that I knew I needed to do as CEO. That's more an internal thing. External, hopefully people can see that. That was a long journey, but not a lot of time. If you remember, when I became CEO, I had an investor day in 2021. I became CEO June 30, 2021. I have an investor day and said, this is what we're going to do as a company. We're going to diversify the company. This is going to be the focus. We're going to go build all of those different businesses. And the technology that we have and we develop can be relevant to all those other industries, and we're going to go put this plan in place. And I think that was the main mission. Okay. And we're still on our way. But it feels like a different Qualcomm right now. I've been in the company for 30 years. It feels like a different company. If you look, we're probably now one of the few semiconductor companies that go from sub 2 milliwatts to 2,000 watts. And we're now into mobile, the future personal AI devices. We're in broadband, wireless and wireline. We're in the PC. We're industrial. We're in the robotics. We enter into the data center. And I think that was the transformation of Qualcomm into a much more diversified company. But it was important to create different capabilities and core competencies for Qualcomm and all those other industries across semi, and that was the main mission.
Okay, so
that still is.
Okay, so we'll talk a little bit about that. Let's first talk about smartphones. So, again, one of the reasons that I started this podcast was for people to get to know the leaders behind the technology that's absolutely going to transform their lives. Okay, and wireless transformed people's lives, and in countless ways. But wireless didn't just happen. It had to be imagined, it had to be engineered, it had to be built, and Qualcomm was at the center of that. So tell me, before we go on to kind of the diversification strategy, tell me a little bit about where we are in this moment on smartphones and whether or not smartphones are just sort of, okay, they're like, water and electricity, it's just a given, it's mature, we've hit a peak, or is there some new leap that is going to happen, whether through AI or form factor or whatever you see as the next wave of innovation?
Yeah, I love answering this question. And the reason I love answering this question, because maybe the reason we at Qualcomm, we have a different perspective on those things is it may be a little bit because of the history. I just told you that I've been fortunate enough of being able to be to every single wireless generation. And every single generation of wireless, there was a very important capability that needed to be added to wireless and the associated transformation that comes from the capability. So it's easier for me to answer this question walking you through this journey, right? So when 2G started, and that was when Qualcomm got into the map with CDMA, the purpose was, can you create a technology that allow every person on Earth to have a telephone with the same quality that you have on a wireline? That was CDMA. And you saw what happened with 2G. 2G, you have this massive explosion that everybody got a phone. Everybody got a phone. That happened with 2G. Cell exploded. It was an incredible thing. You can walk around with a telephone, and you can now contact every person in the world, and every person in the world can contact you. What was 3G? 3G was about the internet just started. Can we connect those phones to the internet? And you saw what happened. Because of 3G, you started to see a lot more of us using email, getting email with attachments. You started to see, how popular those devices became, not only for you to make phone calls, but you to get information, for you to communicate via email, via text. You saw the BlackBerry, that was an incredible thing. Then 4G. Can we actually deliver broadband? And by delivering broadband, we're going to turn the phone into a computer. And I don't need to tell you what happened with the smartphone revolution. I think if I take away your phone, I'm going to be very unhappy right now. And that was the mission of 4G. It was not just about broadband. Can we make the phone into a computer? It's now the largest development platform ever created by mankind. And it pushes the boundaries from a technology. I will argue because of 4G and because there was a clear understanding what the mission was, that Qualcomm became a computing company. Because we were not before, but because of 4G, we had to. You probably remember, we're the first company in the world to actually create a CPU called Scorpion. They had a gigahertz processor, clock speed, and could actually run a high-level OS in a phone. Nothing was available at the time. And Qualcomm, had to go do that. And I think a lot of the capabilities we developed in computing was before we needed to develop the fundamental technologies that enable and the standard that allow the phone to become a computer with broadband. That's 4G. So 4G did other things, right? Because of 4G, you saw a whole different industry get developed as a result of that. There will be no Uber if it wasn't for 4G and smartphones. There won't be. And I can give you examples after example of different full companies and business that got created on top of this platform. And one of the things you saw with 4G is that we started giving up our iPods and started to see and our CDs and started to stream music. Today, the cars don't even have a CD player anymore. You stream music. But when you started to get to the smartphone revolution, a couple of things happened. You don't have a technology anymore to provide unlimited data rates, and you don't have a technology to actually allow you to have high-definition video consumption. So that was the mission of 5G. 5G actually has three major features. Can I enable a smartphone to have unlimited data rates in the same way that you actually have at your home? And it's interesting, a lot of people take that for granted. I often keep hearing thinkers say, I didn't see that significant change from 4G to 5G? Of course, I think people are so used to smartphone, they take for granted. Because of 5G, you have unlimited data rates, and you actually have high definition video download. Look at what did with video streaming. What 4G did for music, it did for video. And also 5G has mission critical capabilities. Okay, that's where we are right now. Okay. So now I'm going to start answering your question. What's 6G? There's a real capability that is now required. And you have to understand the overall context of where we are. It's a society from a technology evolution standpoint to understand what is 6G all about. So now I'm going to tell you what's happening with AI. So in the history of personal computing, and that's where phones are inserted into it, not PCs, phones is the largest personal computing platform. In the history of personal computing, a lot of those things we have seen the evolution of the computing, evolution of the software, evolution, the use case coming as a result of the change in the human-computer interface. When the first PC was created by the combination of Intel, Microsoft, and IBM, there was an S2 keyboard, right? So we all learned how to type an S2 keyboard. You look at an OS that was designed for that human interface, text, that was MS-DOS, and that was the first computer. Then Xerox invented the mouse, and you could now have a graphical user interface. Incredible. As a result, the computer changed, the OS change, even changed from MS-DOS to Windows. The programs, we didn't call apps at the time, we called programs, changed dramatically. And because the human-computer interface changed. But now, the computer could fit in the palm of your hand and you touch it. The whole thing changed. OSs changed, app stores came. We talk about apps. Developers started to develop an app in a small screen for you to touch, and that's kind of where we are right now. But now, one of the capabilities of AI, especially when you talk about large visual models, large language models, now the computer understands us. We don't have to teach, we don't have to learn people how to interact with a computer. Whatever we say, whatever we hear, whatever we see, and that see is very important, the computer understands. So one of the many capabilities of AI, besides you go to a chat box and ask a question, is taking a role now in the human-computer interface. Therefore, everything changes. The computer is going to change, the OS is going to change, the application is going to change, the network is going to change. So now I'm going to connect this with the conversation we just had about 6G. So now we're going to an environment that from our phone, we're going to start to have different classes of devices, and those applications are going to get replaced by agents, and the agents are going to hear what we say, they're going to read what we write, and they're going to see what we see. Just think about see what we see. That's a massive uplink. So one of the things that 6G brings, one of the many things, is 6G is going to be the technology that needs to solve a very important problem, which is now 5G was about high performance, high definition video streaming. Now I need a massive uplink because we all going to be walking cameras. We're going to have our glasses, and our glasses are going to see what we see, and we're going to interact with the agents. And I'm happy to talk about some of the use cases, but many of the use cases are yet to be invented, in the same way that nobody thought about Uber when we start thinking about 4G. So that's one of the things that's going to happen with 6G. I have a massive uplink. The other thing that's going to happen with 6G is we're going to use AI in the network, and the ability to, we're going to teach the system is going to process radio signals as physical AI. Radio signals are going to be physical AI that you're going to have models going to be trained on it, and with that, you're going to start to have a brand new capability. You're going to treat every radio signal as radar, and you're going to have a digital twin of the world at scale. So this is another thing the 6G will do, and that's provide important context for agents. So we're just at the beginning of one of the biggest changes that we had in the mobile industry, and it's going to be the same thing that happened before. And I'll add on top of that a tradition. For us in the wireless industry, we know that even numbers are very disruptive. 2G was massive. Everybody got a phone. 4G was massive. Your phone became a computer. 6G is where you're going to have now agents being part of the interface. And the experience is going to feel very, very different. It's going to be, you're going to be with glasses that, and the smart glasses is one of the devices. There are going to be more devices. But you're going to have glasses that are going to be seeing what you see, and it's going to be immersed in the context. It's like you have a friend, and I'm going to, let's say I see you on the street, and then the agent's going to tell me, hey, Cristiano, just pay attention. Jodi's coming. You may want to say hi. I say, hi, Jodi, how are you? Or I'll be walking around and, in your job, and your agent's going to tell you, like, I notice you have a few minutes right now. Can I talk to you about your agenda? You have some conflicts. I would like to sort it out for you. And what else are you going to do? You're going to buy things? I don't know. But we're just at the beginning of a big change. So the reason I love answering this question when you ask me, it's like smartphones, it's like mature, it's this industry now to the point, and usually that's what happens at the end of a generation, at the beginning of another generation. So for us at Qualcomm, that's like that's par for the course. We've seen this happen with the mobile industry since the very beginning. But we're incredibly excited about what the changes are going to be in mobile. And what is interesting is this. When agents become the center, you're going to have a massive industry change. We can already see it. And the change is going to come in two ways. One way that this industry is going to change is the center of gravity is going to move from your smartphone to agents, and I'll explain what that means. But the other shift is workloads are going to start shifting between devices. I remember in the early days of smartphone, when we had 4G and the phone became a computer, had smartphones, there were people said, this is going to replace the PC. Now, it didn't replace the PC. We still have our PC. They're very, very useful. When we go to the PC, we work with the PC based on the form factor we're used to. We use an S2 keyboard. Even though you can touch your PC, you don't touch it. You do a mouse and keyboard. But workloads did shift. We used to do e-commerce on PCs. We don't do it anymore. The majority of the world does e-commerce on a mobile device. So what's going to happen is you're still going to have your phone. Your phone, like you're still going to have PC. Your phone's not going to go anywhere. But some of the workloads are going to shift to glasses, to jewelry, to pendants. If I put an IP address on a piece of jewelry that has a microphone and a camera, I can connect to an agent. I can do incredible things. So we're going to see those new classes of devices. And the next phase of mobile is going to be the mix of fashion and technology, because humans already decided what they wear. We're not going to go out and see everybody wearing a big helmet. No, I think everybody's going to wear what they wear, but technology is going to get incorporated. So the next phase of mobile will be the extension of agents to multiple devices, different class of devices. You're going to see the mix of fashion and technology. Your phone's going to have a dual role. And I will finish this answer by saying, the biggest shift that is not yet understood is we're moving now from a smartphone center to an agent center. So when you think about the definition of something as simple as a wearable, before or today, it's just a device that it provides an extension of the functionality of your phone. That's why most people buy the wearable from the same company. Because if you get a watch, it sends your sensor data to the phone, get a notification back from the phone. But now, if the center is the agent, once the agent understands human intentions, it doesn't matter which device it is, things change. For example, you may define the functionality of a smartwatch based on the fact they get notification and send data for the phones. Tomorrow, you measure the value of this about the number of things that the agent can do for you. It's going to feel like an app store. Like every week, your watch or your smart glass get a new function and get a new function. And I think that's what we're going to see the next transition of mobile. Very long answer to your question, but as you can see at Qualcomm, we're very passionate about this.
No, it's an amazing vision. So when is 6G?
It's going to come soon. I think we actually talk about it at MWC. We're going to have silicon in 28, and the first systems are going to be in 29. We're very proud. I think we announced a coalition. We got, I think now 60 companies that share the vision with Qualcomm, and it's going to be the next future of mobile. But that's kind of the natural progression, right? Anyway.
Yeah. Again, it's very exciting to think about that. So, when you started as CEO in 2021, your vision was to diversify the company at least 50% outside of mobile.
Well, I think what we wanted at the time is we realized there's so many growth markets that Qualcomm technology would be relevant. I think one of the unique things about Qualcomm, I know our competitors are not going to agree with this, but I think we have an incredible technology capability. Every new industry we enter, we actually develop in the leading platform from a product and technology standpoint. And the idea was actually to create significant growth for the company on markets that are growing. Phones right now, it's a mature market, and phone is still below the total number of phones that used to be before the pandemic. Phone grows with GDP, with population, because everybody has a phone. Is artificially suppressed this year because of the fun everybody's having with memory right now. But until you have a big technology transition, like the one that is coming with 6G, the market becomes a mature market that grows single digit. However, there are many other opportunities right now when you look at the broad semiconductor market that Qualcomm has the right to participate. They're growing double digits. Some, if you look at our automotive business, we have been doing 30% growth year over year, record after record. And so when we put the strategy, we're going to go after all of this. It just happens that the way we're growing in those markets, mobile is going to be about 50% of the Qualcomm revenue. As we get scale in those other markets, it could be more, it could be less, but I think it's and the reason I'm giving you this answer versus a very simple answer is, yes, we said fiscal 29, mobile is going to be 50%. Is because fiscal 29, you can have a big 6G upgrade and then everything's going to be growing. So we'll see.
Okay.
This episode is brought to you by Morgan Stanley. Morgan Stanley celebrated its 90th anniversary last year, and its tech investment banking team has prided itself in working with the most innovative entrepreneurs and leadership companies for decades. During that time, they've led IPOs for hundreds of tech companies, including Apple, ARM, Astera Labs, Broadcom, Cisco, Facebook, Google, NVIDIA, Salesforce, and Uber. In addition, they worked as a trusted advisor and executed thousands of M&A transactions for some of the most industry-defining deals in technology. Throughout the years, Morgan Stanley's tech investment banking team's success has been achieved by dedication, consistency, and a North Star purpose of helping its clients to maximize their opportunities and overcome their challenges. Now, let's get back to the episode.
So, of the diversification markets, which are you most excited about?
All of it.
Okay.
All of it.
Okay.
I love all my products, all my markets. Now, there are some that are different stage of development than others. Automotive, I think we're very proud of it. I think we're now working with virtually every OEM in the world is one way or the other a customer Qualcomm. I think we did the right thing. We had the right vision that, the car is going to become, a connected computer on wheels, but it's a car. It's not a phone. It's not a PC. It's a car. It's a new computing surface. I think we're very proud of what we accomplished. And I tell the story later if you're interested. How do we decided to get into the automotive business? But the other ones that also we're incredibly excited about it is we have a right to play in robotics. Robotics, everything that made us successful in cars are true in robotics. You need a lot of battery life in robotics, and you need high level of integration. You need industrial capabilities. So if you want a robot that's $20,000 to become $5,000, if you needed to have from 2 hours of battery life to 6 or 8 hours of battery life, if you need to have the level of integration that you see on phones and consumer electronic, that's right in the Qualcomm, core competence. So it's just going to be another validation of what we prove in automotive. So I'm very excited about that. I'm excited about the digital transformation of industrial, which has a lot of AI on the edge. I think has been an area that was not well understood, but I look at this business today, Jodi, I am not demand bound. I'm solution bound. Like our ability to serve all of the customers, it's what constraining us right now. It's a massive market. And, I like being the underdog in data centers. But yes, I'm excited about everything we're doing. This new future of mobile, we just talked about it. I think the progress we have been making in broadband, and those things are all important. I think for Qualcomm, given our ambitions and the scale of business we want to have, I think all of those efforts are important, and that's one of the reasons we're doing all of it at the same time.
So do you think Wall Street appreciates what you're trying to do?
They will. I think our message has been consistent. We have been executing, and I think, we have been showing progress. Each one of those businesses, we actually build the right products, which is for a company like Qualcomm, the most important thing is product. If you don't have the right product, you don't have the right to win. But I'm going to give an example. And I remember, those are not perfect examples, but those, sometimes it's good to point it out. I remember like TI, when you have the decline of Nokia, and TI was a Nokia supplier, right? For a very, very long time. I think until they went to the transition out of Nokia, they had very low multiples. I think the market didn't appreciate. And then if you saw what happened right after they transitioned out of mobile, and they continue to execute on the strategy that they had in place, how much their multiple expansion and the valuation changed. And I think I feel the Qualcomm, we're going to this process today, which is no matter how much time I tell that, yes, we're going to transition out of Apple. People want to see, you get a multiple of an Apple supplier. You get a multiple of mobile. It's so interesting. I know we're doing something right because sometimes I have people come and say, yes, if this particular diversified business was stand-alone company, this is the multiple you're going to get. Why didn't you spin that out? So I think it's just a matter of time. Okay. We'll just continue to execute, and I think we're going to get the valuation we deserve, because what really matters is the IP capability of this company, and I think the track record of this company from a technology standpoint is really incredible.
Okay, so let's stay on the AI topic for a moment. So AI obviously has, changed the entire view of the semiconductor industry, I think, and it's an exciting time. I mean, I always say that there's people that probably would have retired 2 or 3 years ago, and no one wants to leave. Everybody wants to be part of the AI revolution because it's so exciting from a technology perspective. So by 2030, what does that's only now 4 years away. So what does our daily life look like? I mean, you talked a lot about, what 6G will bring, but, enterprises are wanting to know what the return on investment is. So talk maybe a little bit about that. And then our individual lives, when do we have something besides just putting a question into ChatGPT?
Okay. I'm going to give you 2 answers to this question. I think one answer, I'm going to probably give the answer you would expect from a CEO of a tech company that is doing a lot of computing and connectivity technology that has a lot to do with AI. Then I'm going to give you my own personal answer on this, how I feel about this, right or wrong, right? So I think the first answer is, AI is a new form of doing computing. I think it's a new way. It's a new way of doing software. It's changing, dramatically the way you think about what is the job, how you create software, how software is run, how the computing is done, and it's going to change a lot of architecture. We're just the beginning of inference at scale. It's going to happen everywhere. I think there's kind of a useless debate that people have about what is the cloud, what's in the edge. It's interesting. I look at your phone today. Your phone has incredible amount of computing technologies, and if you put in airplane mode, it's kind of, you don't want to use it. And that's because it's 100% cloud and it's 100% device. The software will find its most efficient computing, and everything will be running inference. It's going to be doing on the data center, it's going to be doing on the near edge, it's going to be doing on-prem, it's going to do it on devices. So there's going to be how we're going to be thinking about applications. I believe you're going to start in 2026. It's going to be the year of agents. Agents are going to become more popular. When agents become more popular, you started to see the real usability of AI. Yes, we can all go to a chat box. We can ask questions. We can create memes. We can create images. But agents are going to be fundamentally changing the whole concept of an app. You started to see things like OpenClaw as an example. It shows what's possible. And we will see in 2026 the beginning of agents getting traction. It's going to get more traction. So when we get to 2030, it's going to be a big percentage of the workloads of how you're going to be interacting with your PC, with your phone, with different types of devices that we just talked about it. It's going to be very natural for you to have agents when you're kind of in your car, because voice and vision is a natural way for interact with devices. And on the enterprise side, you're going to see a lot more AI capability embedded in workflows, embedded in tools. So it's going to be, by 2030, very mature. I do believe that AI on the long run is probably underestimated. I think it's probably underhyped. In the beginning, we all debate about what are the speed of investment, the speed of deployment, but it's just, if you just give it enough time, you're going to find where it's really useful. You're going to see the real innovation and creation is going to come, how people are going to apply those agents to workflows that are meaningful, and it's going to get scale. So I look at 2030 as we're going to have a new set of mobile devices, as we talk about it, which is going to be using AI as the main interface between the man and machine. Is going to have a lot of agents. That's going to have an impact on the rest of the devices the consumer utilizes, and I'm going to see enterprises having large-scale AI deploying to the workflows. We really don't know what they are. I think now we see coding, you see different functions get automated, but as agents starts to get popular, you're going to have a scenario that you're going to find out what the winners and the losers are. None of it is decided. It's always go back in 2000 and say, oh yeah, MapQuest is the map that's going to win. Nobody knows. Okay. So, but I think for sure is going to be a very mature, I think, scale for AI, and it's going to change everything that we think about computers and computing, connectivity, and of course, semi as a result. Now I'm going to give you my personal answer.
Okay.
When I came out of college, and I was kind of in college, we use PCs, we use, Spice, we use computer-aided design, and I got to my first job, and I realized in the job you have the mix. You have the mix of the new and the old. For example, I remember I'll come in the office, and they still have to go to the fax machine and get all the fax. They came in overnight, and they have like a fax that you needed to respond, and then while you could go to the computer and type in an inter-office memo, you can always get like a notepad. This is particularly true, for Japanese companies because of the Japanese handwriting, and you kind of write an intercompany memo, put it back in the fax machine, right? And then one day, everybody has a computer, you have an email, you have internet, and it was insane. It's the whole thing changed. Now we take it for granted. I look at AI the same way. It's like a tool. So a lot of people say, what's going to happen? It's going to be, the machine's going to take over. Every job is going to get eliminated. I don't know. I think like everything, there will be an impact. But we have seen this before. I think, just remember, I think what computer-aided design did with people that actually going to do, the design with pen, and you have artists that they were doing a lot of the circuits, a lot of the civil construction diagrams. Today's all computer made. So the same type of change that you saw in an enterprise when all of a sudden you have email, internet, and a bunch of other things, that is the type of change. And, companies are going to adapt, and you're going to see it's going to change the way people work. It's going to change the workflows. New things are going to be invented, and I think that's the history of technology. So that's how I feel about it.
So what concerns you the most from like a human perspective about the next 5 years?
Look, it's a difficult question for me to answer. Look, I'm a very religious person. I'm Catholic, so. I always worried about, that and how I am as a human being, not only the next 5 years, like today and tomorrow, and the next 5 years, the next 10 years. And I think that's, especially, I think those that be giving a lot of responsibility, you need to make sure, you're doing the right thing with it. Now, the other part of the answer is, look, the word's complicated place right now, and so I think a lot is, when you ask me a lot, what's going to happen in 5 years, there's a lot happening like this month, in the next 6 months, in the next year. But I think from a technology standpoint, we at Qualcomm, we like change. Look, I'm going to say this at the risk of being a little bit controversial, but if you look of what happened in mobile, and the mobile industry is a great example of that. And I know you when I talk about it all the way back to 2G. The history of the mobile industry is many, many companies. They went from zero to hero, and then they went from hero to zero. But we survived. There's one thing in common. There's some companies like Qualcomm that survive and remain relevant with companies that came and went. And I think technology changes, big shifts, those things has proven very good for Qualcomm. We thrive in chaos, in technology transition. So I'm actually looking at the next 5 years because of that with a great set of optimism.
Okay, so you have a very, very intense job. I mean, I think that I'm biased, but I think that the semiconductor industry is like one of the most intense industries in the world. Every CEO I know, it's sort of 24/7. You're always on. So how does one really run a company and have a meaningful life, have the family that's so important to you, the hobbies, the religion? So how do you do all of that? And what's sort of your advice to people that are starting their careers, and some people like deciding not to have children because they don't want to have to make those kinds of decisions?
Yes. So first I'm going to say the same thing I told you about being born in Brazil, I'll say about semiconductors. Semiconductors is not for beginners. So I think I share the same bias. It's not an easy industry. It's a very complicated industry. Not only it's complex, but you also have an industry that change. You have to adapt to change. You are in the middle of a geopolitical industry as well. So it's not very easy. The second part of the answer to the question is it's very difficult because you always have to you always have to make choices, and you want not to compromise those choices. But you always, like when I look at me, I'm always running because I have to take care of my family. I had to spend time with my kids. I have to go, take care of myself. I had to spend time at church. I had to spend time with my employees. I had to spend time with customers. So I was running. So I tried to do a good job of this. I don't know if I do a good job of this. I always have less time than I will need. I think that's one of the biggest issue that you have as a CEO. Time is the most, I think, valuable resource. But I face all of this with always a very positive attitude. I have an attitude. It's just going to work out. I'm going to find time for everything, and don't make those big choices about let's not do this. So I'll try to balance. Sometimes I'm tired. I want to go to bed, but my kids want to watch a movie. I'll watch a movie. I'll figure it out. I'll figure out some other time to sleep, and you just keep. I'm just like that. I'm just keep moving, keep pushing, and assume it's going to work out at the end.
And at the end of the day, how do you want to be remembered as not only in your professional life, but in your personal life? How do you want, your biography to read?
Look, I don't think about those things. Frankly, I feel like I try very, very hard to be who I am, to be the same person I've been. I don't have any ambition of people to kind of think about it like this is what he accomplished. Like I said, I've been a religious person and Catholic. I think I'm more important to make sure I do everything to go up there. That's more important than my biography. But I do want to probably be remembered. I want to make sure that I did everything I could to be a good dad, to be, to take care of my family, and to be a good steward of Qualcomm, because that's actually more important for me. The reason I come to this job every day, motivated, energized, it's actually because of the people of this company. It's about what, the culture that this company has, and the fact that I have a lot of people here that I work very hard not to disappoint, and to make sure I'm doing my part. And I think that's my mission.
Okay. Well, this was fun. I hope you had as much fun as I did, and I learned a lot about you. And I think that one of the goals behind doing this podcast was get to know people, and I think that we have, and people are going to know that you have great character, that you care very much, and some of the thinking behind the technology. So
thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you. Very kind of you. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Cristiano.
I had fun having this conversation with you.